Today on Robot Rivals, 2 colleges will design and build robots from scratch in only 1 day. When time is up, they'll square off in a head-to-head competition on their quest to become the Robot Rivals champions. Welcome to Robot Rivals, everybody. I'm your host, Chris Chianelli. We have 2 great teams and a very challenging competition for you today. So let's get right to it. Today's matchup pits Purdue and the University of Washington in a head-to-head competition. The winner of this challenge will move on to the second round. And here they are, the University of Washington Huskies.
1, 2, 3, go Huskies!
Paul Nguyen, Senior, Electrical Engineering.
John Gosting, Senior, Electrical Engineering.
Justin Walborg, grad student, Mechanical Engineering.
Meet your robot rivals, the Purdue Boilermakers.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, go Purdue!
I'm Christopher Noble. I'm a senior in Computer Integrated Manufacturing Technology.
My name is Ross Walborg. I'm a senior in Computer Integrated Manufacturing Technology.
Joe Taylor, Junior, Aerospace Engineering.
Come on in, guys! And welcome to Robot Rivals. Now, before today, you all received a package containing all the information you were going to need for today's competition, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, let's take a look at the specifics of your assignment. Today's Robot Rivals must build a robot that can move to a tree, cut down as many trees as possible, and grasp or handle the tree to place it in a holding area. During the design process, we'll give our schools a surprise household item to incorporate into their robot. The team that uses the most functional parts will receive a 50-point bonus in the competition. All right, guys, I know it sounds like a lot of work, but never fear. Our experts are here to help you out. Working today with Purdue is Brian Neve. He'll lend his expertise from multiple engineering degrees and years of television robotic competitions. Joining Brian and working with the University of Washington is Buzz Dawson, an engineer for the NASA Kennedy Space Center and mentor to youth robotic teams across the country. All right, time to divide you guys up. Now you have everything you need to complete today's task. And remember, the competition comes up really quick, so let's get to building those bots! The teams are really geared up and ready to go. We'll see if they have what it takes to win today's competition. Now that we know what our robot rivals have to accomplish, let's listen in on their brainstorming. Before Washington can put pen to paper, they'll have to think through the basics first. To help, Buzz has gathered a few motors from the fully stocked shelves.
Right. Now, see, if we look at the specs on these motors here, this one right here, at 24 volts runs at 130 RPM, whereas these right here run at 230. So this one here is going to move a lot faster, but I think we're probably going to want to have a little control over this, so I think we want very slow and controlled movement.
We're hoping that the pruning shears make the tree fall the same way, and they fall on this curved arm that they slide down and into the hopper with.
Purdue's early focus is on their tree-grabbing apparatus. If designed properly, it can make all the difference in the final competition. Before our schools get too far along, I've stopped in to give them a sample of the trees they'll be cutting in the competition.
This isn't too bad. This isn't too bad.
Yeah. So we can see if those loppers fit around the bottom there.
Purdue's plan to utilize the tree cutters or garden loppers means that they will have to find a way to make them a manageable size for their robot.
Yeah, no problem there. You have to figure out how to handle the branches in the hopper.
Yeah, there's a lot of branches.
Take up a lot of
I was
space.
thinking branches like as a normal tree, but like these branches.
These are like leaves,
Yeah, this
Yeah.
would be that big.
You can make a hopper this big.
These will
though.
fold in easy.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, they're pretty foldable, so hopefully it'll just flop down and you know, it won't be that big.
But it's not very heavy, so they're not going to fold in too much.
Now that both teams have their sample trees, it looks as if Washington is still trying to come up with a design for their cutting apparatus.
Well, if we make the grabbing arm wide enough, we can just grab it and just claw the whole thing in instead of making a little tiny one that turns like this.
Yeah.
Just get a big one that goes like this and pulls it in.
Just so maybe that piece that helped us guide the robot in the first place can be the grabbing arm as well.
That's a
And,
good call.
We can actually use that to like hug it in and then
That's a very good idea.
slice it off.
It looks as if both Washington and Purdue are off to a great start. As our teams continue working on their ideas, Buzz and Brian make sure the parts are ready for construction and the shelves are stocked with everything they'll need. Don't go away. Nuts, bolts, transistors, and resistors transform into wood-cutting robots. But not before we throw one last surprise into the mix. Today's robot rivals from the University of Washington and Purdue have a challenging task to conquer, but that's only the beginning. They're facing top engineering schools from all around the country who are competing for the Robot Rivals Championship, a shot at winning the $2,000 scholarship, and a place on the coveted J.F. Engelberger Trophy. Before our schools finalize their designs, we're going to throw a twist into the process. On every Robot Rivals, we give the teams a surprise household item, items that can be found in almost every home or office. No matter what we give them, the students will be challenged to incorporate everyday parts into their high-tech robots.
It's a little bicycle.
Oh, there we go.
Isn't it cute?
Man.
But it's got lots of stuff on it. I mean, look at the chains.
Yeah.
You got here that you can use that for pivots. You can use this for pivots.
Remember, the team that uses the most functional parts from the bicycle will receive a 50-point bonus in the competition. Purdue seems eager to incorporate the surprise household items into their robot. Let's look at their design. Their plan consists of building a base frame and attaching drive wheels in the rear and smaller wheels in the front. The cutting apparatus will be made from a pair of garden loppers and mounted between the front wheels. A pair of arms mounted high in the front will guide the cut trees into a hopper on top of the robot. The hopper will pivot to one side, enabling them to deposit the trees into a designated area.
There he goes.
I'll race you.
As Brian and Purdue have a little fun, let's see how the Huskies react to the surprise household item.
We're going to see what this will do for us.
What? Well, actually, we can use some of this.
Think we can use some of that?
Yeah. They
What do you think we can use off of
And
this?
there's the gears and the
Yep.
the wheels and.
The Huskies seem a little unsure of the bicycle. Their initial design calls for assembling the drivetrain on two pre-assembled motor and wheel assemblies in a front-wheel drive configuration. Aluminum will connect the two in a rigid base for their frame. Mounted under the two motors will be their cutting apparatus, and above the motors will be the grabbing device to handle the trees. The rear of the robot will ride on casters and help support the weight of the trees. It sounds like a straightforward design, but we'll see if they can fit the bicycle into their plans.
You can always use pieces of round stock and stuff like that as long as we can chop this thing up.
We can
use
do
it.
whatever we want with this sucker. Let's bust out the saws and hack this sucker to pieces.
Washington has already torn apart the surprise household item. They're really focused on getting those bonus points.
Well, what we're doing here is taking the bike apart to see what components we'll be able to use in the final design. One thing that we're thinking about using is the braking setup from the bike. We can actually use this to help grab onto the tree here to actually push this brake. We may also cut off these two bars in order to place sort of a V shape in the front to help guide the tree in towards the saw.
While John and Tho continue to look for usable parts in the bike, let's take a look at what Purdue's up to.
This is where we take our pruning shears here and basically make them a part that's not going to be too usable for a human to use, but hopefully our robot should be able to use them pretty well.
Purdue's Joe Taylor is trying to remove the long handles from the garden loppers that they're going to use as their cutter. They'll mount them in the front of the robot and use a motor to power them. Cutting through the plastic handles is taking too long, so with some help from Brian, a torch is used to melt them off.
There, got it.
Building robots is lots of fun, and if you want to keep it fun, keep it safe. We have some items here which are going to help you do just that. Goggles. Always wear them. Cutting, soldering, doesn't matter. Solder can splatter up in your eye, bad.
Respirator.
A lot of noxious fumes given off by a lot of stuff here. It's better to be safe than sorry. Some of the frequencies in cutting, very high pitched. Ear protection, glove protection. If you're using a torch, always have the fire extinguisher. When you're working, it's good to keep the work secure. Very safe thing to keep the work secure. You have some clamps here. Clamp it down before you cut it. If you have a fine job you're doing, the helping hands. If your hands are free, you're going to do a safer job. For more information on any of the safety items we went over here, go to our website, DIYnet.com. Lots of cool stuff there. When we return, Washington decides to use a part from the bicycle that could cut their competition time in half, while Purdue focuses more on their original design. The competition comes up quickly, so stay tuned for all the excitement here on Robot Rivals.
How far would you need to go to see the future? To find out now how new technologies will transform your business and open the door to unseen opportunity. Where would you look for ideas that can take you further? Purdue. It's here.
Today's robot rivals are Washington and Purdue. They're competing to build a wood-cutting robot using the items we've stocked in the lab. They'll need to get the robots built and running in one day in order to compete head-to-head in our final competition. Washington is deep into construction. While Toe and John continue digging for bicycle parts, Justin is concentrating on the main drivetrain. He's using 1-inch extruded aluminum to form the rigid framing between the two pre-assembled drive motors.
Okay, I got the first set of holes drilled over in the drill press. Now I'm attaching it to the first motor so that I can get the second motor all lined up here. And then we'll know exactly where the second set of holes have to go. And then this will be nice and rigidly put together once I get the second set of holes drilled.
After drilling the holes in the aluminum, Justin assembles the robot's drivetrain. This also acts as the base frame for the robot.
This is the gear sprocket we got off the bicycle, and we're thinking of actually using this as our saw blade. Obviously, it's not designed to cut things, but it has teeth in it, and if we, with a little bit of sharpening of the teeth, and we can actually definitely use this to cut down trees.
Okay, now get a load of this. The Huskies, the first thing they did is they tore apart the surprise item. That's so they can incorporate as many parts early in the design. Very interesting. Let's go over and take a look at the Boilermaker and see what they're doing. Okay, now check out what's going on over here on the Purdue side of the competition. Take a look. The surprise household item, they haven't even touched it yet, but they're already starting to assemble the chassis of their bot. Two totally different approaches going on both sides. Interesting thing is to see which pays off in the competition. I can't wait.
All right, what I'm doing here is cutting the extruded aluminum to length so that we can start building our drive chain and start mounting the motors and get this thing running around, get something else to work on.
After cutting all the frame pieces to length, Ross moves quickly to assemble the chassis and attach the motors.
What I'm doing here is mounting the motors to the chassis. I'm using the bolts right here and these sliding nuts that slide in the channels here on the chassis frame, and using the Allen wrench to secure them.
As Ross continues with the frame, now let's see how Chris is doing with the electronics.
Right now what I'm currently working on is trying to figure out the layout of the electronics board. We have these, which are speed controllers. We also have these relays, which act as simple on-off switches, and which is all controlled by the control system right here. This is the essential to every working robot. And what right now I'm trying to figure out is the exact layout and how to power all these devices from the batteries.
Chris really has his hands full trying to get the wiring of the control system taken care of. He needs to make sure that all the parts are communicating properly while doing it as fast as he can. The Huskies want those bonus points. Their plan is to use the bicycle sprocket as a saw blade. Buzz has taken a grinder and is beveling the edges of the sprocket's teeth to make it sharp enough to cut through a tree. While he finishes the sprocket, John and Toe are working on how to utilize the homemade saw blade.
Looks like you're using one of our little handheld saws here. Why are we going to use this one instead of trying to build something on our own?
We were actually thinking of building our own saw, but the thing about the saw is that the blade needs to be really balanced to the motor, because when these things are going to be spinning at thousands RPM, miles per minute, and if the blade is not balanced on the motor, that can be very dangerous. And this is a commercially available product, so as you can see, it's already balanced for us perfectly.
Using the sprocket as their saw blade, coupled with this handheld saw motor, should prove to be interesting. Chris and Brian are almost finished with the brains of their robot. Let's see what they've done.
Normally, when you're wiring in circuits, you want to make each circuit separate, have its own separate power supply, and not daisy chain stuff together. But we're a little limited on wires, a little limited on time, so we're going to go ahead and daisy chain stuff up just to make it easier on us.
Daisy chaining is similar to Christmas tree lights. Instead of plugging each strand into separate electrical outlets, you can plug the ends together to form a continuous string of lights. Chris has wired the Purdue robot the same way, looping all the speed controllers together and then connecting the ends directly to the battery. While the wiring gets finished, let's see how Joe is doing on the frame.
You can see we finished putting our chassis together. We're using this extruded aluminum that makes it really easy to assemble what we need to. And you can see in the front there we're using the training wheels from the bicycle that we were given. That gives us points for using a household item, and they make some pretty light, pretty decent front wheels. They're not as maneuverable as the casters we were looking at, but it looks like they'll work out okay.
The Purdue team has really planned ahead to make their wiring system and chassis fit right together.
Duct tape is like the Force. You got your dark side, you got your light side, and it holds the universe together. Now, actually, the reason why we're using duct tape is this is acrylic and it's very brittle. If we try to drill it in for mounting holes, it's going to crack and shatter all over the place. So, you know, better life through chemistry. We're going to tape it on.
Don't touch that remote. When Robot Rivals returns, we'll see movement from Purdue and a quickened pace by Washington as both teams prepare to cut some wood.
I'm learning to care for prostate cancer patients at a UW teaching hospital.
I study cancer cells from those same patients in the lab. Being able to study the disease, care for patients suffering from it, and research new ways to diagnose it helps me to see the whole cancer care picture. I'm researching a way to isolate a patient's cancer cells. Then we can determine how to treat them effectively and increase a patient's chances of survival. That would be so exciting.
The building continues on today's Robot Rivals, and our teams from Purdue and Washington are well on their way to building woodcutting robots. Both teams have their game faces on and are really making some headway. Let's take a look at Purdue's progress.
Right now we're making a linkage that's going to connect our scissor shear mechanism to the motor that makes it run.
Joe then moves to drilling the holes into the ends of the loppers, which will be attached to the drilled aluminum pieces. Purdue plans to power the cutting assembly with a linear actuator. A linear actuator is used in robotics to create a pushing or pulling movement. When power is applied, the motor pushes the inner cylinder forward or in reverse as needed. Now let's take a look at what the Huskies are up to.
Okay, what we're doing here is it got a little bit closer to the frame we're actually going to use for the robot. I'm just putting the back wheel together. It's going to end up screwing in like this, right in between these two posts, so I can stick it in there. Yeah. So we're going to end up having the pincher that the other guys have been working on mount right in between these two poles. Our saw blade's going to go right down here, and then all our controllers and like the linear actuator is going to be mounted back here. And so, hopefully, we're going to do some test driving right pretty soon, make sure we can actually go where we think we're going to go.
John and Toe are using the brake caliper from the bicycle to assemble a grabber for the tree. They need to handle the cut tree and deposit it into the holding area. To do this, they've taken some 1-inch steel and have shaped it to fit inside the caliper and snugly around the trunk of the tree.
Well, we were just finishing up attaching the tongs for our little grabber arm, and we are testing it out on the tree to see how it will perform.
As the problem of holding the tree is being dealt with, Buzz is nearing completion on Washington's homemade saw blade. He must make it fit tightly into the saw blade assembly. He's taken a 1-inch galvanized steel washer and ground it down to fit in the center hole of the sprocket.
All right, well, we took a washer, trimmed it down, and used a vise to press fit it into here so we make sure this thing is perfectly cylindrical.
Now, there's all kinds of motors in the world, and a lot of people think there's a motor in this chainsaw, when really this is an engine. What does have a motor is this food processor, this drill, and what we use in robotics are these permanent magnet DC motors. Now, motors were invented back in the 1600s, and they work on two different properties of magnetism. One is that like poles repel each other, and dislike poles attract each other. And they work on the fact that current through a wire creates a magnetic field. So if you take apart a motor and you look inside of it, you have a stator and an armature. The stator doesn't move and has the magnets attached to the outside of it. The armature spins around, and the reason why it spins around is because the current through these wires create a magnetic field in them. And the magnetic field is north at one time, and it pulls it to one magnet, then it flips over and it goes to a south pole, boom, it pushes it away. So it alternates pulling, pushing, and just spins and spins and spins. It's that simple. Now, if you're going to build a robot, you need to make sure you get the right motor. And for more information on motors and magnetism and power, see our website, DIYnet.com.
That blade really looks mean. After using the sprocket to make the saw blade, the Huskies are using the front forks of the bicycle to mount it to their robot.
That looks pretty good.
I'm just making a few cuts here to help us mount this to the frame, and then the saw is actually going to mount onto this.
While the saw assembly is coming together, Justin works on mounting the grabber assembly.
Okay, this is going to be what grabs our tree. You saw John and Tho building it earlier. I'm working on mounting it on the actual thing. It's going to sit between a couple of risers that come right off the front like that. We don't know exactly where our saw is going to be located this direction yet, so that's the reason they're not mounted. But in the back end, in order to make them pinch in front, the back end you have to pull on this end of the cable. So we're going to use this linear actuator here to push the slider back, and the end of it will be mounted in the slider, so it closes.
Robo-logging, only on Robot Rivals. Well, guys, we're halfway through the day. How are the teams doing? Buzz?
Man, University of Washington's just tearing into that bicycle, ripping everything out to see how much of it they can actually use. They're making a saw blade out of that sprocket. It's going to be really cool to go, just zip right through those trees. It's going to be awesome.
All right. Brian, how's Purdue doing?
Purdue is great. They got the chassis together. They got the electronics nearly finished. And I know some people may think that the saw blade might be an advantage, but Purdue really believes in the sheer power of those loppers.
All right. Tree-cutting robots. It'll be very interesting to see which of these designs will cut more timber to take the win. The competition is coming up quickly, and Purdue's robot is shaping up. Let's take a look at what they have.
You ready?
Hey guys, check it out.
Hey,
Ross and I finished the lopper mechanism here. We got some lop-tastic action going on.
Sweet.
We have our linear actuator here, so when the motor goes, this moves in and out. And we combined that with the loppers we took apart and the aluminum pieces we made to connect them. And you can see we're using the longest of the two hull settings, but if it looks like we have enough power, then we can use some of the shorter holes and make this thing go a little faster.
Excellent. Man, we're ready to cut some trees.
Yeah.
Hey, look what we got over here.
We got the drivetrain up and
Flip
running.
that power.
Nice.
All right, guys.
Hey, Chris.
Half the day's up.
Oh, man.
It looks like you guys are really cooking. It's lit up like a Christmas tree.
Well, you want to see some more lights?
Yeah, no, I want to see it run.
Oh, well, check it out. We got forward, we got back, right, and left, and we're just getting ready to do our first drive. You want to see it?
Let it rip.
Let's rock.
All right, guys. Sit down on the ground.
Okay, here we go. Watch out, you guys.
It's alive. You guys are well on your way.
Right.
Purdue has good reason to celebrate. Now they can move to mounting the loppers and begin on the hopper. Washington spent half the day building and aren't even close to testing. However, their tree grabber is done and saw blade is nearly finished. It'll be interesting to see what building approach prevails in our wood cutting competition. Will Washington be able to catch up to Purdue's moving robot, or will they get run over trying? Find out when we come back to Robot Rivals. It's been a great day so far here on Robot Rivals. We have two teams from the University of Washington and Purdue who are given the task of building wood-cutting robots. Both teams are well into construction, but with their own distinct approach to robot building. Washington has adopted the divide and conquer approach. As for Purdue, they've spent the majority of their time working toward a successful first test. Let's check in.
Well, now we're attaching the brackets to hold this actuator for our lopping mechanism. So our chopper's going to mount up here, and as this moves up and down, it's going to actuate that. We're just using a couple of quick steel brackets to mount this thing onto our aluminum frame, and hopefully that's going to be enough to do it.
All right, to make sure this hopper holds the trees without them falling out the sides, what we're going to do is mount two of these, cut to size, of course, using the existing bolts like this and this. So we'll have a nice little X-brace here, so the trees, when they're on the hopper, will be pressing out against this, but won't be falling out of our hopper.
Using angle steel and creating a simple V-shape, the Purdue team has designed their hopper to catch the trees and then deposit them into the designated area. After a successful test of the motor and blade assembly, it's then attached to the bicycle forks that John has prepared using half-inch galvanized bolts.
Alrighty, well, I think we finally have our tree cutting saw mounted. We're using the forks off the bicycle and the sprocket off the bicycle, and all we're using this motor for is just to spin the sprocket, so that way we can hold it on the front of the robot and just go right in like this and just cut right through the tree.
Now Justin and Buzz are attaching the tree cutter assembly to the front of the robot. While they're finishing it up, let's see how Purdue's garden lopper is coming along. Like Washington, the Boilermakers now have their cutting apparatus mounted to the front of their robot. Their plan is fairly simple. Drive the robot to a tree and use the garden loppers to cut the tree's trunk. This is Purdue's first cutting attempt. Hopefully, their strategy works.
Is it stalling or is it out of stroke?
It's out of stroke.
Oops. Oh, almost. Here's the problem. Currently, the arms aren't able to close the loppers all the way with the amount of stroke available from the linear actuator. Joe is making new, longer aluminum connectors for the scissor assembly to fix the problem. Time for another test.
Cutting and timber!
All right, man.
It works.
Way to go, Joe. His assessment of the stroke problem and quick solution to design longer aluminum arms really paid off. Purdue is definitely ahead of the game now.
Now, when you're building your own robot at home, the easiest and most efficient way to make your robot move around is to equip it with wheels. Now, wheels come in a variety of different shapes and sizes and hardnesses. Now, for example, this little kid's toy has very hard plastic wheels that are very durable, but they have no traction whatsoever. On the other hand, you can get wheels that are made of solid rubber like this, or even pneumatic ones that you find on a bicycle or even your car at home, like this, that are just filled with air. Your car tire is actually designed to give you a long-lasting wheel. It'll last you about 50,000 miles, so it's got a lot of traction, but not as much as a race car tire that's very sticky, but it'll last for only about 70 laps. Now, the problem with these, though, is the fact they are filled with air, so if you puncture them, they run out of air. On the other hand, we have these tires here, which are really good for your robot, and if something were to go right through it, nothing's going to happen because they are filled with foam. So for more information about tires and wheels for your own robot, check out our website at DIYnet.com.
After a long day of building all the pieces of their robot, the Huskies are finally putting it all together.
We're really happy right now because we finally got the linear actuator mounted. It's going to be pulling on this sliding bed. This bed is what's going to be pulling our cable. The cable runs all the way up here to our jaws, and when it slides back, the jaws are going to close.
As the mechanics are being finished, Washington quickly gets their wiring taken care of, and it's time for a test drive.
Okay, just kind of drive it around. Really? Whoa!
Come on. And it works!
Washington's approach really paid off with a successful test. During the brainstorming process earlier today, the Huskies decided to branch out and work on individual components of their robot. This meant that a test of the whole robot couldn't happen until this late hour in the day. With time at a premium and lots to do, the teams need to put on their finishing touches.
Washington Huskies, that's it. It's competition time. I hope your bot's ready.
Yes, it is.
Purdue! The day is done!
Oh, we're ready.
We're ready. Back away from those tools.
Hey, no tools. We're good. We're good.
We finished hours ago.
Hours. That's it. Everybody's ready for the competition. Let's see what these guys have built.
All right.
Oh!
Hey.
Just got a reflector over here.
Holy smokes. Look at that.
Cut the frame. Nice. Pretty good.
That is sweet. You see that sprocket?
That's not a flag. We got a flag over there.
How did they dump?
This thing's gonna fall apart. I don't even know
Looks
what's
like it's
going on
gonna
here.
fly.
Nice flag.
There
we go.
They use the brake to do the
They use the brake cable. Oh, yeah.
That's a cool tripod idea.
The brake gripper.
Yeah, the tripod.
It snaps it.
Use a linear actuator under here to pull it.
All right, now, when we come back, get ready for the Robo Lumberjack competition. It's gonna be great. Don't go away.
Welcome back to Robot Rivals. Today we have two teams from the University of Washington and Purdue who were given the challenge to design and build a woodcutting robot. The brainstorming of both schools looked similar early in the day, but once we introduced our surprise household item, the bicycle, we began to see two different designs emerge. It'll be interesting to see what design prevails. I've dressed for the occasion and the teams are ready.
It's been a wild day here in the lab. Let's see how these bots came together.
Washington's design was set right away, and they made their decisions about using a slower, more controllable drive motor. They then picked the linear actuator and brake caliper for the tree grabber. A circular saw was used as a drive motor for the tree cutter, but they opted to make the saw blade out of a bicycle sprocket. Last-minute concerns about safety had them rushing to use another part of the bicycle as a guide for the blade. After finishing up the electronics and control systems, it was time for a wood-cutting test and preparations for the final competition. Purdue got their design together quickly. A frame and drive system were built early in the day. Working smoothly as a team, they test drove their robot. Using a linear actuator and a pair of garden loppers as their cutting device, they were ready for another test. Finally, they tried to use bicycle parts for the dumping hopper, but had to abandon the idea and wound up duct taping it to their robot. Also, their cutting loppers were flawed and had to be reworked, leading to a successful test very late in the day. With some final touches, their robot was finally ready.
We are ready for the Robo Lumberjacking competition. Washington, are you ready?
Yeah!
Purdue, are you ready? Yeah! We're all ready, but first, let's take a look at the rules.
Each robot must begin within its starting area. It then must navigate to a tree and cut it down. After cutting down the tree, the robot must then dump it into the holding area. Cutting down a tree is worth 25 points, and depositing it in the holding area is worth 50 points. The team with the most points after 5 minutes wins the competition.
All right, we are ready for the competition. Purdue used 5 parts from the bicycle, while Washington used 6. So Washington gets a 50-point bonus right from the start. All right, in this corner, in the Purdue corner, we have the Bunyan Boilermaker. And in the Washington corner, we have the Washington Woodchucker. Teams, are you ready?
Yeah!
Bots ready?
Yeah!
3, 2, 1, go! And the Bunyan Boilermaker's off to a quick start. And he's lining up for his first kill.
Good. Cut it.
The Bunyan Boilermaker is already making a cut. Will it get it into the hopper? We'll see. Oh, we got a cut going on here. All right. The Washington Woodchuckers has cut one, but it dropped away from them. The Woodchuckers having a little trouble getting lined up.
Take it off over here.
And the Bunyan Boilermakers made a drop.
Nice, Joe.
And there's Washington's cutter blade you see again. Washington seems to be having a problem with their tree grabber. Their tree grabber's not working.
Easy. Oh, easy.
We got another cut going on here. Well, the Woodchucker's cutting them down, but it... Whoa! Well,
Come back easy.
Come back, Joe. Come back. Come on, Joe. Come on, Joe.
Straight back. You get it? All right, get the next one. Get the next one.
we got a 4th cut on the Bunyan Boilermaker.
There goes Washington. Oh, they cut that last tree, but I saw their saw blade stop. It seems that they're having a problem with their saw blade. Not the blade itself, but what attaches the blade to the motor.
You gotta back up a little. You'll probably go forward. Sweet.
And the Bunyan Boilermaker's making his last cut.
Let's go, baby.
We're almost out of time. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. And look what we have here. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have a tie. We have all the trees down. Washington had a 50-point bonus, but Purdue got one in the hopper. So that makes it a tie. 2 really good bots. They really did what they're supposed to do, and we end up with a tie. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a grand chop-off. Now, what that means, 3 trees get set up on each side. The first team to either chop all 3 down or just chop 1 down and get it in the hopper wins. All right. Good work, guys. 2 good bots. I'm really impressed. We're ready for the chop-off tiebreaker. 3, 2, 1, go!
And it looks like Purdue's come right in on a tree already.
Oh! The Bunyan Boilermaker's already got one. The Woodchucker's got a little problem here. All right! Good job, Joe. And the Washington Woodchucker's got one. Look. And it looks like he's having a little bit of problem with this blade. And the Bunyan Boilermaker's got 2, and it's going wild. And that's it.
Purdue just won the grand chop-off.
And the competition goes to the Purdue Boilermaker. All right, guys, excellent job.
Thank you.
All right. It was real close.
You guys did an awesome robot.
It was this close, you guys.
When we return, we'll hear reactions from both teams, plus we'll find out who Purdue will be facing next on their mission to become the Robot Rivals champions. Welcome back to Robot Rivals. It's been an exciting day here at the lab as the University of Washington and Purdue were given 1 day to design and build a robot that would accomplish a series of tasks. When their time was up, we sent each school to separate corners and geared up for the woodcutting competition.
3, 2, 1, go!
Purdue drew first blood by cutting down 2 trees and later dropping one of them in the holding area, a strategy that gave the Boilermakers the lead. But with only seconds left, Washington would rally back with a quick cut to send our robot rivals into a tie-breaking chop-off.
3, 2, 1, go!
And with that, Purdue took off and never looked back, cutting a total of 3 trees to Washington's 1.
That's it! We're done!
Enough to award them the match and send Purdue into the second round of tournament play.
All right, guys, excellent job.
Let's go to Washington's side and get reactions on their robot building experience.
Justin, Tho, John, Buzz, great job. This competition was so close, and your bot really worked well. Justin, tell me how you feel.
Well, you know, all day we had things laying all over. We had our parts all put together in separate places, but it looked like we didn't have anything. Then finally, right at the end, it all came together, and I thought we had a great robot. We did a good job, but it just came up a little bit behind in the end.
Yeah, bang, it came together. Tho?
Well, I'm really proud of our work. The robot is really easy to control. I drove the thing myself.
Yeah,
how it works.
yeah.
And so, engineering-wise, there's nothing wrong with it. It's really safe and sound.
John?
We thoroughly cannibalized our household item. We worked really well together as a team, and we had a good time. So.
Yeah, you did a good job, and you did have a good time. Buzz, I think these guys did great.
You know, I could not agree with you more. This has got to be my favorite robot so far. It's lean and it's mean, and these guys did such an awesome job on this. I just feel so bad that we came up just that close.
You guys should be really proud. Better luck next season. All right, let's go take a look at Purdue. Chris, Joe, Ross, Brian, excellent job. You won. The bot's simple. I think that was part of its success. What do you think?
Yeah, it had a great reaction to the machine. Like, we drove very well. It just performed very well. That's all I'll say.
Well, we had a solid drivetrain that was really reliable with lots of power and a mechanism for shearing the trees that worked every time.
I like the wheelies. Ross?
As you can see, it took some damage and still went out and kept on going.
Brian, how'd the guys do?
Oh, the guys did great. I mean, they won. It was fabulous. They put the drivetrain together really quick, and it was really solid and dependable, and that's what won it for them.
All right, let's take a look at who you're going to be facing next time.
Purdue will be facing the winner of the Clemson and University of Utah Retrieval Robot Competition. This is sure to be a great matchup, taking us closer to the final competition and awarding of the J.F. Engelberger Trophy.
We had a fantastic time here on Robot Rivals. On behalf of Purdue, University of Washington, Brian, and Buzz, we'll see you next time on Robot Rivals.
Yeah!
The chores! And the Green Acres is the place for me. Is the
Yeah, so while you're getting your exercise in, Brian, we're going to go ahead and actually build a robot.
All right, you guys get to work. I'm going to play with my
All right, all right.
I'm lined up. And the Bunyan Boilermakers made another drop.